If it seems like your avoidant ex doesn't even care that you broke up, you're not alone. This is a very common experience for anyone who's ever dated somebody with the avoidant attachment style. Now, this can be really hard because it feels like they never cared about you at all, like the relationship meant nothing to them. But don't worry, because I'm going to tell you what your avoidant ex is really feeling and how you can make them regret the breakup and come crawling back to you, begging for another chance. So before we get too deep into this, you definitely need to know about avoidance and how it actually works. It's what's called an attachment style. So that means that it determines how a person forms romantic attachment to another person. Now, avoidants struggle a lot with intimacy, and they use the strategy of avoidance to deal with conflict and difficult feelings. That's really it. It doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily a bad partner. And it definitely doesn't mean that they're destined to be alone forever. Now, I need to say this because of the way that I hear people talk about avoidance online. Some people seem to think that avoidants are basically abusive vampires who are just here to ruin your life. But in reality, avoidance is just an emotional regulation strategy that really only comes into play in really certain situations. And yes, this is a strategy that causes conflict and disconnection. So it's certainly not a great strategy for forming relationships or protecting your feelings, but it's also not a death sentence for your relationship. I also need you to know that just as it's not your fault, it's also not your ex's fault either. Chances are they developed this strategy when they were a young child as a result of parents who were emotionally distant. So the avoidant expressed emotional needs, and then they were shamed or neglected. So now they see intimacy as a source of shame and fear, and so they put in place strategies to avoid this. So you may have noticed that when things started to get really good with the relationship, they started to pull away. Or when you expressed emotional needs of your own, they would shut down. And chances are this attachment style had a big effect on your breakup as well, even if it wasn't the main cause. Because avoidance weakens your connection. It makes it brittle. So what could have been just a small argument can more easily grow into a huge fight that tears you apart. And it doesn't help that avoidants struggle to handle conflict because it actually requires openness and vulnerability. Instead, the avoidant avoids the issues and lets them fester until they erupt into relationship-ending fights. But after the breakup, avoidance can be even more problematic, especially if you're hoping to reconnect with an avoidant ex. Because conflict, vulnerability, honesty, and intimacy are all going to be required for the two of you to reconnect. And these are all things that the avoidant really struggles to access. So it's a bit of a catch-22. Plus, since avoidants avoid conflict at all costs, they can be hard to lure back because they found the breakup to be so overwhelming. But here's the thing. Many avoidants love you more than you could possibly imagine. Because they keep their feelings to themselves and struggle to express these emotions, they can really harbor feelings for another person for a long time without ever revealing them, especially when that person is their ex. But as big as that love is, the fear of opening up can be even greater. And it becomes a really destructive pattern. Because chances are, this isn't the first time this has happened to your avoidant ex. They've almost certainly had relationships in the past that have gone this way. You know, they meet someone they really like, they start to get close and connect in ways that they never expected. And this closeness makes them happy, but it also scares them. So when the closeness becomes too much, they sabotage the relationship either by pulling away, refusing to meet the other person's needs, failing to commit, or some other avoidance strategy. And then, of course, they end up all alone. And you probably look at your avoidant and say, it seems like I meant nothing to them. I cared about them, but to them, I was just a distraction. And that really is an understandable reaction because of the avoidant's remarkable ability to keep their feelings hidden from you. But the thing about this pattern that I've talked about is that the avoidant sees it too, and they hate it even more than you do. It tears them up inside to know that they're responsible for pushing away somebody that they really cared about. They destroyed these relationships with their avoidant behavior, and that's become a huge source of shame for them. And unfortunately, they have no other strategy but to avoid. So the more it happens, the bigger these feelings become, and the more threatening they are to the avoidant psyche. So they push them away all over again. And to push them away, they have to push you away. And this is why you're in the position that you are right now. Because the more available you are to your ex after the breakup, the more loving you are towards them, the more you seem to want them back in your life, the worse they actually feel. Because they feel like they've treated you so poorly, in reality, probably worse than they actually have. And so they're ashamed to see you. And to have you forgive them makes them really feel like the bad guy. But don't worry, this isn't the end for you and your ex, because it turns out there is actually something to this avoidant thing. No, it's not a great strategy to use all the time, especially with a romantic partner for obvious reasons, but they also do it for a reason. Taking time away from a source of stress, in this case your relationship, really does make it fade away in the mind of the avoidant. Though they may seem to be doing nothing and living their best life without you, in reality, they're processing the breakup and their own feelings, which is going to make them, more manageable in the future. So in essence, with time apart, they're able to move on from the breakup, but not from you. And this is why people say that avoidant exes always come back after a breakup. And the weird thing is that it often happens 6 months or even a year later, because it can take the avoidant that long to actually process what's happened. Don't worry, you don't necessarily have to wait that long to actually reconnect with your ex, because I am going to give you some strategies to speed up this process later in the video. Remember, your avoidant ex almost certainly already regrets the breakup. They may feel relieved for a few days after the breakup, just because they no longer have to deal with the intensely emotional confrontations that actually come with breaking up. But after those first 1 or 2 days, they're rocked by a wave of shame and regret for ending the relationship. But when are they going to start to regret losing you? Well, that can't happen until it's clear to them that they have actually lost you. Because if you continue to be present, attentive, and communicative with your ex after a breakup, then it's going to be pretty clear that you're still open to getting back together. And if they know that, if they know that they can have you, really anytime they want, they'll never feel that regret of losing you. And you need them to feel that sense of loss, that feeling that you're not coming back this time, because that's what's going to cause them to spring into action and actually work to get you back. So here's how the process typically goes. The breakup separates the two of you completely for a couple of days. And then you quickly realize that this isn't how it's supposed to go. So you reach out to them and start trying to get them back. You may just be extra friendly toward them, or you may be more upfront about your desire to reconnect. But either way, they know what's on the table. But they're in another world of guilt, sadness, and avoidance. So your message is really just distract them from the process of moving on from the breakup. They're in no place emotionally to dive back into the relationship right now. And so your messages represent another emotional threat to them. And the more you reach out to them and they don't respond or they brush you off, the more shame they feel, because they feel like they're hurting you all over again. And so in a way, you're actually driving them away from you. And this is why chasing avoidance never works. But there is another way. You can take the hint that they're giving and actually respect their boundaries. Instead of reaching out to them, being available and friendly towards them, you can be cold and distant yourself. You can pull away and leave them to wonder what you are thinking. Now, this can feel like admitting defeat, like accepting the breakup and moving on, but it shouldn't, because it's actually the moment that you're starting to win back your ex. They just don't know it yet. Because it's when you finally pull away that your ex will feel that sense of loss, that regret for losing you. Because that's when they'll see that they end up alone if they don't act quickly. And after some time, this is going to draw them back to you like nothing else can. It's not until you stop chasing them that they see that they were running from you all along. And they see that they don't actually want to run away from you. They were just doing it out of habit to avoid those difficult feelings. And now that you're really gone, they won't be distracted from the negative feeling that they're having from the breakup. And they'll finally see that they're the source of these problems, not you. But let's get down to brass tacks here. How do you actually make this happen practically? Well, if you've seen any of my videos, then of course you've heard me talk about no contact. The process of cutting off all communication with your ex. So that means no texting, no phone calls, no hanging out, no dropping by, and so on. Now, I typically recommend that you keep up no contact for at least 30 days or so following the breakup. But when you are dealing with an avoidant, I actually usually recommend you go for even more, between 45 and 60 days if you want to have the full effect. Avoidants process post-breakup emotions a little bit slower than the average person. Now, I know this is going to be hard. It's definitely going to be hard, especially for people who date avoidants. Because when you do date an avoidant, you get used to being the one pushing the relationship forward. Because if you don't, then nothing ever happens. But that's what makes this so powerful. Your ex will not expect it. Subconsciously, they've always felt like you were the pursuer and they were always being pursued. They've been used to this dynamic in their dating life, and while it hasn't worked out for them, it's certainly become familiar. But when you cut them off completely, it's going to be really hard for them to understand. They'll be forced to do some serious introspection, and they'll realize that they do want you back in their life. Now, This isn't, of course, guaranteed to work, but it certainly has the best success rate of really any strategy that I've tried, and I've been helping people with this kind of problem for 15 years now. Now, if you're looking for further advice, I recently actually made a whole video about how to reconnect with avoidance after no contact is over. It's called The Avoidance Secret, and I will link to it up here in the corner and down below in the description as well. So please watch that next, because that is it for this one. Thank you so much for watching to the end. See you guys next time.